I am sitting in my office right now, looking out at the city lights below. My phone just buzzed with another voicemail from my mother, her voice cracking as she asked why I refused to help my brother. 17 years old, I once believed my parents loved their children equally. That kid had no idea how wrong he was. They took my future and handed it to someone who burned it to ashes. This is my story, and I am finally ready to tell you everything. Before I begin, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now let me take you back to where it all started, to the summer that changed everything I believed about family. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. Our house sat on a street lined with oak trees, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and summer evenings meant the smell of barbecue drifting through open windows. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My father, Ronald, worked as a floor manager at a manufacturing plant about 20 miles from our home. He had been there for over 2 decades, climbing his way up from the assembly line. My mother, Patricia, handled the books for a small accounting firm, working part-time, so she could be home when we got back from school. Then there was my brother, Derek. He was 4 years older than me, and from the moment I could form memories, I understood one thing clearly. Derek was the golden child. He was the firstborn son, the one who would carry on the family name, the one my father talked about with pride in his voice. I remember sitting at the dinner table as a kid, listening to my dad go on about how Derek would take over someday. How Derek had the smarts and the charm to make something of himself. I would sit there quietly, pushing peas around my plate, wondering where I fit into that picture. I learned early on that my place in the family was somewhere in the background. I wore Derek's old clothes, used his old baseball gloves, slept in the bedroom he had outgrown. None of this felt unusual to me at the time. I just accepted it as the way things were. My parents never said they loved Derek more, but actions have a way of speaking louder than words ever could. The one thing that kept me going was the college fund. My grandparents on my mother's side passed away when I was 12 years old. They were wonderful people, the kind of grandparents who always had candy in their pockets and stories that made you laugh until your stomach hurt. Before they died, they set up education funds for both Derek and me. $40,000 each tucked away in accounts that were meant to give us a head start in life. My parents told me about this money when I turned 13. They said it was waiting for me, that if I worked hard in school, I would have a path to any university I wanted. That promise became my North Star. I studied harder than anyone in my class. I stayed up late finishing homework, joined every extracurricular activity that might look good on an application, and dreamed about the day I would walk onto a college campus as a student. While Derek barely graduated high school and stumbled through 2 years of community college before dropping out, I was building a future brick by brick. The summer before my senior year of high school, I received the news I had been waiting for. I got accepted into my dream school for software engineering. The acceptance letter arrived in a thick envelope, and I remember my hands shaking as I opened it. For a moment, everything felt possible. I was going to be the first person in my family to graduate from a 4-year university. I was going to make something of myself. Derek came home that same summer with what he called the opportunity of a lifetime. He was 21 years old, freshly dropped out of college and full of big ideas. He wanted to open a store selling motorcycle parts and accessories. He had found a location in town, had talked to some suppliers, and was convinced he was about to become a millionaire. All he needed was startup capital. $75,000 to be exact. I did not pay much attention to Derek's plans at first. I was too busy preparing for my own future, buying textbooks, researching dorm room essentials, counting down the days until I would leave home. But one evening, in late July, my parents called me into the living room. They were sitting on the couch together, and Derek was leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed. Something about the scene made my stomach tighten. My father cleared his throat and told me to sit down. Then he explained that they had made a decision as a family. Derek needed the money for his business. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they could not let it pass. They were going to use my college fund to help him get started. I remember the words hitting me like a punch to the chest. I asked them what they meant. My mother said it gently, as if that would make it easier to hear. They were taking the $40,000 my grandparents had left me and giving it to Derek. I could still go to college, she explained. I would just have to take out loans and pay them back after I graduated. It was not a big deal, she said. Plenty of people did it. I asked why they could not use Derek's college fund instead. My father's face hardened. He told me that Derek's money was already gone. It had been spent on his 2 years at community college, on his car, on expenses that had piled up over time. There was nothing left. I tried to argue. I tried to explain that this was not fair, that I had worked so hard, that this money was supposed to be mine. But my words fell on deaf ears. My mother accused me of being selfish, of not understanding what family meant. My father told me that I was young and had plenty of time to pay off some loans, that I should be grateful they had raised me at all. Derek said nothing. He just stood there with a smirk on his face, watching me crumble. That night I realized the truth. The meeting was not a discussion. It was an announcement. The decision had already been made long before they called me into that room. My opinion did not matter. My future did not matter. All that mattered was Derek. I went to college anyway. I refused to let them take that from me too. But the path I walked was nothing like the one I had imagined. Without my college fund, I had to take out student loans to cover everything. Tuition, housing, books, food. By the time I graduated, I owed $60,000 to various lenders. That number haunted me every single day. To make ends meet during school, I worked 3 jobs. I woke up at 5 in the morning to open a coffee shop near campus, serving espresso to sleepy students and professors. After my classes ended, I would head to the university library, where I shelved books and cleaned study rooms until closing time. On weekends, I tutored high school kids in math, driving across town to sit at kitchen tables and explain algebra to teenagers who would rather be anywhere else. I slept maybe 4 or 5 hours a night if I was lucky. My body ran on caffeine and sheer stubbornness. I lived in the cheapest housing I could find, a cramped apartment that I shared with 3 other guys. My room was barely big enough for a twin bed and a small desk. The walls were thin, the heating was unreliable, and there was always someone making noise at 2 in the morning. But it was what I could afford, so I made it work. The loneliest part was watching my classmates live the college experience I had dreamed about. They joined clubs and went to parties and took weekend trips to the coast. I could not afford any of that. When my friends invited me out, I had to make excuses. Sorry, I have to work. Sorry, I have an early shift. Sorry, I cannot make it. Eventually, they stopped asking. I called home sometimes, hoping for some connection to the family I had left behind. But those conversations always left me feeling emptier than before. My mother would spend the entire call talking about Derek. His store was doing well, she would say. He was making smart decisions. He was going to be successful. She never asked how I was doing. She never wanted to know if I was eating enough or sleeping enough or struggling to keep my head above water. To her, I was already gone, just a voice on the other end of a phone line that interrupted her stories about her favorite son. Meanwhile, Derek was living large. He opened his motorcycle parts store in a prime location downtown, paying rent that ate up a huge chunk of his budget. He bought a brand new pickup truck, claiming he needed it to meet with clients and pick up inventory. Within a year of starting his business, he proposed to a woman named Tiffany and threw a wedding that cost more than my annual tuition. My parents paid for most of it, dipping into savings they claimed they did not have when I asked about my college fund. The first year, Derek bragged about his success constantly. Every time I came home for a holiday, he would talk about his sales numbers, his expansion plans, his vision for the future. My parents hung on every word, their eyes shining with pride. I sat at the table in silence, wondering if they even remembered I existed. The second year, things started to change. The store was not making as much money as Derek had projected. He blamed the economy. He blamed the location. He blamed his employees for not working hard enough. He never blamed himself for overspending on a fancy storefront or buying a truck he did not need. My parents responded by giving him more money. They dipped into their retirement savings to keep his dream alive. The third year, it all came crashing down. Derek's store went bankrupt. He owed creditors over $50,000 on top of what my parents had already poured into the business. Tiffany, who had signed up to marry a successful entrepreneur, suddenly found herself married to a failure. They started fighting constantly, their arguments echoing through my parents' house whenever I visited. By the end of that year, Tiffany filed for divorce and took half of whatever Derek had left. Through all of this, my family never stopped asking me for money. The first time was during my sophomore year. My mother called me crying, saying Derek needed help and asking if I could come home to support him. I was in the middle of midterm exams, studying for tests that would determine whether I kept my scholarship. I told her I could not leave. She called me ungrateful and selfish, then hung up on me. The second time was during my junior year. My father called and demanded that I lend Derek $5,000 to save the struggling store. I explained that I was drowning in debt myself, that I could barely afford groceries, that I had nothing to give. My father scoffed and said I was making money from my part-time jobs, that I was just being greedy. When I refused, the entire family stopped speaking to me for 3 months. The third time came right before my graduation. Derek himself called me, his voice sweet and friendly, in a way that immediately put me on guard. He said he needed $10,000 to turn things around, that this was his last chance to save everything. I told him no. He cursed at me, called me an ungrateful little brother who had forgotten where he came from, then slammed down the phone. I graduated with a 3.8 grade point average despite working more hours than most people work at full-time jobs. I walked across that stage knowing that everything I had accomplished alone. My parents did not attend the ceremony. They said they could not afford the trip. After graduation, I made a decision that changed everything. I was going to leave Ohio and never look back. I applied for jobs across the country, targeting cities where I knew no one and no one knew me. When a tech company in Austin, Texas offered me a position as a junior software developer with a starting salary of $75,000 a year, I accepted without hesitation. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases, bought a one-way plane ticket, and started a new life. Those first few years in Austin were about survival and growth. I worked harder than I ever had before, determined to prove that I was worth something. I stayed late at the office learning new programming languages. I volunteered for projects that other people avoided. I asked questions, constantly soaking up knowledge from anyone willing to teach me. After 2 years, I was promoted to senior developer. After 4 years, I became a team lead managing a group of 12 engineers. My salary climbed to $140,000 a year. For the first time in my life, I was not just surviving, I was thriving. Somewhere along the way, I met Hannah, She worked in the marketing department at my company, a bright and warm woman who laughed easily and listened even more easily. We started as friends, grabbing lunch together in the cafeteria, talking about everything and nothing. Eventually, I told her about my family. I told her about the college fund, about Derek, about the years of being treated like I did not matter. She listened without judgment, and when I finished, she took my hand and said she was sorry that had happened to me. No one had ever said that before. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and the family we had chosen for ourselves. My parents were not invited. Neither was Derek. On that day, surrounded by people who actually cared about me, I understood what family was supposed to feel like. Hannah and I bought a condo in a nice part of the city. I finally paid off my student loans, all $60,000 of them, with money I had earned through my own hard work. We started saving for the future, investing wisely, building the kind of stability I had never known as a child. Back in Ohio, things were very different. Derek, after his divorce, had moved back in with my parents. At 32 years old, he was living in his childhood bedroom, working part-time at a grocery store, and still talking about his next big business idea. My parents, who had spent their retirement savings trying to keep his failed store afloat, were now struggling financially. They could not retire when they wanted to. They could not travel or enjoy their golden years. Everything they had sacrificed for Derek had disappeared into a black hole of bad decisions and false promises. They started calling me more often, not to ask how I was doing or to congratulate me on my success. They called because they needed something. Could I send money for repairs on the house? Could I help cover an unexpected medical bill? Could I loan Derek just a little bit to help him get back on his feet? Every call was a request, a demand, an expectation that I would open my wallet for people who had never opened their hearts to me. Then came the call that pushed me over the edge. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, and Hannah was in the kitchen making dinner. My phone rang, and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was frantic. Derek had a new opportunity. A friend of his wanted to open an auto repair shop, and Derek could be a partner if he contributed $30,000. This was his chance to finally turn his life around. She begged me to lend him the money. She said I was doing so well that I would barely notice it, that family had to help family. I told her no. She started crying, calling me heartless and cruel. My father grabbed the phone and started yelling. He demanded to know who I thought I was refusing to help my own brother. He said everything I had was because of them, because they had raised me and fed me and put a roof over my head. He said I owed them. Then Derek got on the line. His voice dripped with contempt as he called me a selfish little brat who had forgotten where he came from. He said the college fund was family money anyway, that I had no right to hold a grudge over something that happened so long ago. He said I needed to get over myself and write the check. Something inside me shifted. For years, I had absorbed their insults and demands in silence. I had swallowed my anger and tried to move on. But in that moment, listening to Derek lecture me about selfishness while asking for my money, I finally found my voice. I told them the truth. I told them that they took $40,000 from me, money that my grandparents had specifically set aside for my education. I told them that because of their decision, I graduated with $60,000 in debt. I told them about the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, the years of loneliness and struggle. I told them about every phone call where they accused me of being selfish for not having money to give. I laid it all out calmly and clearly, with a steadiness that surprised even me. And then I said the words that had been building inside me for over a decade. I said that I built my life from nothing because they took everything from me. I said that I owe this family nothing. I said that if anything, they owe me an apology that I know will never come. The line went silent. My mother was crying softly. My father said nothing. Derek had no comeback, no insult, no demand. For the first time, they had nothing to say. I hung up the phone, blocked all 3 of their numbers, and turned to Hannah. I told her I was done. She wrapped her arms around me and held me close. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The months that followed were not easy. Even though I had made the right decision, it still hurt. There were nights when I woke up at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too harsh. There were moments when I saw happy families at the grocery store or in the park, and I felt a hollow ache in my chest for something I never had. But I was not alone. Hannah was there every step of the way, reminding me that choosing myself was not a sin. My friend Marcus, who I had met during those brutal college years, called me regularly just to check in. He had seen me at my lowest, working myself to exhaustion, while everyone else enjoyed their youth. He told me I had nothing to apologize for. I started seeing a therapist, something I had always resisted, because I thought I could handle everything on my own. Talking to her helped me understand that the guilt I felt was not a sign that I had done something wrong. It was a scar left by years of being told that my needs did not matter. She helped me see that setting boundaries was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. Slowly, I began to heal. I focused on the life I was building with Hannah, on my career, on the friendships that actually nurtured me. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I stopped hoping my parents would someday see me as equal to Derek. I let go of the fantasy and embraced the reality. About 6 months after I cut off contact, a letter arrived at my office. It was from my mother. She must have looked up the company address online. I opened it with steady hands, curious what she had to say after half a year of silence. The letter was not an apology. It talked about how families should forgive each other, how life is too short for grudges, how she hoped I would come to my senses and reconnect. There was no acknowledgement of what they had done, no recognition of the pain they had caused. Just an expectation that I would forget everything and come back into the fold. I did not respond. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and went back to work. I was not angry anymore. I just did not have room in my life for people who could not see me for who I was. Today, my life looks nothing like what my 17-year-old self imagined. I am an engineering manager at a company I respect, leading a team of talented people who challenge me to be better every day. My income is stable, my future is secure, and I no longer carry the weight of student debt. Hannah and I are talking about starting a family of our own. We have promised each other that when we have children, we will love them equally and unconditionally. No favorites, no forgotten kids, just love. I do not speak to Derek or my father. Occasionally, my mother sends an email. I read them, but never reply. There is no hatred in my heart, just an acceptance that some relationships cannot be repaired. They made their choice when they handed my future to someone who squandered it. I made my choice when I decided to build a future of my own. If you are watching this, and you recognize your own story and mine, I want you to know something. You are not selfish for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not a bad person for walking away from people who hurt you, even if those people share your blood. Family is supposed to lift you up, not hold you down. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you were born into. I look out my office window now at the Austin skyline glowing in the evening light. I think about that 17-year-old kid who lost his college fund and thought his world was ending. I want to tell him that it was just the beginning. Losing that money forced me to become stronger than I ever knew I could be. It taught me that my worth was never determined by people who failed to see it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took advantage of you? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? Share your story in the comments below. If this video touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. Share it with someone who might need to hear these words today. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope that wherever you are, you find the courage to build the life you deserve. And remember, the people who truly love you will never make you feel like you are not enough.